Chapter 8. Aggregate Expenditure and Equilibrium Output. Chapter Objectives. You have 5 minutes to read summary, pages 39 to 40, and then, there will be a short quiz. Chapter Objectives. 1. When you spend money at the mall, is that good for the economy? Does the amount of your income that you spend cause an increase in someone else's income? Consumption spending is the main component of real GDP. If consumption spending falls, real GDP will decline. Because real GDP is also the income for the economy, consumption spending by one group means income for another group within the economy. Chapter Objectives. 2. Do the spending habits of households like yours translate to the spending patterns for the economy as a whole? Households increase their consumption spending when income increases. The same holds true for aggregate consumption in the economy. The relationship between income and consumption can be described with a consumption function for a household and an aggregate consumption function for a whole economy. Chapter Objectives. 3. How much of their extra income do people spend? How can we figure this out? The fraction of extra income that households spend is the marginal propensity to consume. It can be determined by noting the change in consumption spending as aggregate income, Y, changes. Chapter Objectives. 4. Besides spending on consumer goods, where else does money get spent in an economy? With no taxes and no foreign sector, any income that does not go toward consumption spending goes to saving. Saving provides the money used by firms to undertake investment projects. Chapter Objectives. 5. Is there a difference between what an economy plans to spend and the amount that it buys? There is a difference between the amount of money that is spent on consumption and investment spending and the amount an economy actually produces. The amount spent is planned aggregate expenditure. The amount produced is real GDP. When these two differ, inventories change to make up the difference. Chapter Objectives. 6. How can changes in consumption or investment spending affect the economy? Can the economy change a lot with only a small change in spending habits? Changes in spending will cause the equilibrium level of GDP to change. This can be shown on the aggregate expenditure diagram as an upward shift of the aggregate expenditure curve. As the curve crosses the 450 line, it gives the corresponding level of real GDP. Because increases in investment or consumption spending get spent and respent in the economy, small changes in spending can cause larger changes in real GDP. Chapter Objectives. 7. How can spending get multiplied in the economy? How does this affect recessions and unemployment? Because small changes in spending can cause large changes in real GDP, the spending on consumption and investment gets multiplied in an economy. Declines in investment or consumption can cause real GDP to decline enough to pull the economy into recession, with the resulting increase in unemployment. The multiplier describes the effect of spending on real GDP. The size of the multiplier depends on the marginal propensity to consume. The diagram shows the core of macroeconomic theory. Aggregate output N. Aggregate income, Y. Aggregate output is the total quantity of goods and services produced, or supplied, in an economy in a given period. Aggregate income is the total income received by all factors of production in a given period. Aggregate output N. Aggregate income, Y. Aggregate output, income, Y, is a combined term used to remind you of the exact equality between aggregate output and aggregate income. When we talk about output, Y, we mean real output, or the quantities of goods and services produced, not the dollars in circulation. Income, consumption, and saving, Y, C, and S. A household can do two, and only two, things with its income. It can buy goods and services, that is, it can consume or it can save. S equals Y minus C. Saving, S, is the part of its income that a household does not consume in a given period, distinguished from savings, which is the current stock of accumulated saving. Explaining spending behavior. All income is either spent on consumption or saved in an economy in which there are no taxes. Saving/aggregate income, consumption. Household consumption and saving. Some determinants of aggregate consumption include household income, household wealth, interest rates, households' expectations about the future. In the general theory, Keynes argued that household consumption is directly related to its income. Household consumption and saving. The relationship between consumption and income is called the consumption function. For an individual household, the consumption function shows the level of consumption at each level of household income. Household consumption and saving. C equals A plus B times Y. The slope of the consumption function, B, is called the marginal propensity to consume, MPC, or the fraction of a change in income that is consumed, or spent. Household consumption and saving. The fraction of a change in income that is saved is called the marginal propensity to save, MPS. MPC plus MPS equals 1. Once we know how much consumption will result from a given level of income, we know how much saving there will be. Therefore, S equals Y minus C. An aggregate consumption function, derived from the equation C equals 100 plus 0.75 Y. An aggregate consumption function, derived from the equation C equals 100 plus 0.75 Y. At a national income of 0, consumption is $100 billion, A. For every $100 billion increase in income, dy, consumption rises by $75 billion, dc. Deriving a saving function from a consumption function. C equals 100 plus 0.75 y. S equals y minus c. Planned investment, I. Investment refers to purchases by firms of new buildings and equipment and additions to inventories, all of which add to firms' capital stock. One component of investment inventory change is partly determined by how much households decide to buy, which is not under the complete control of firms. Change in inventory equals production minus sales. Actual versus planned investment. Desired or planned investment refers to the additions to capital stock and inventory that are planned by firms. Actual investment is the actual amount of investment that takes place. It includes items such as unplanned changes in inventories. The planned investment function. For now, we will assume that planned investment is fixed. It does not change when income changes. When a variable, such as planned investment, is assumed not to depend on the state of the economy, it is said to be an autonomous variable. Planned aggregate expenditure, AE. Planned aggregate expenditure is the total amount the economy plans to spend in a given period. It is equal to consumption plus planned investment. Equilibrium aggregate. Output, income. Equilibrium occurs when there is no tendency for change. In the macroeconomic goods market, equilibrium occurs when planned aggregate expenditure is equal to aggregate output. Equilibrium aggregate. Output, income. Aggregate output equals what? Planned aggregate expenditure equals AE equals C plus I. At equilibrium, Y equals AE, or Y equals C plus I. Equilibrium aggregate output, income. At equilibrium, Y equals C plus I. Equilibrium aggregate output, income. C equals 100 plus 0.75 times Y and I equals 25. Equilibrium occurs at Y equals 500 in the table. Equilibrium aggregate output, income. C equals 100 plus 0.75 times Y and I equals 25. Equilibrium occurs at Y equals 500 in the table. The saving/investment approach to equilibrium. If planned investment is exactly equal to saving, then planned aggregate expenditure is exactly equal to aggregate output, and there is equilibrium. The S equals I approach to equilibrium. Aggregate output will be equal to planned aggregate expenditure only when saving equals planned investment, S equals I. The multiplier. The multiplier is the ratio of the change in the equilibrium level of output to a change in some autonomous variable. An autonomous variable is a variable that is assumed not to depend on the state of the economy, that is, it does not change when the economy changes. In this chapter, for example, we consider planned investment to be autonomous. The multiplier. The multiplier of autonomous investment describes the impact of an initial increase in planned investment on production, income, consumption spending, and equilibrium income. The size of the multiplier depends on the slope of the planned aggregate expenditure line. The multiplier equation. The marginal propensity to save may be expressed as MPS equals change in S divided by change in Y. Because DS must be equal to diff or equilibrium to be restored, we can substitute diff or DS and solve. Change in Y equals change in I times 1 over 1 MPC. The multiplier. After an increase in planned investment, equilibrium output is 4 times the amount of the increase in planned investment. The size of the multiplier. In the real world, the size of the multiplier in the US economy is about 1.4. For example, a sustained increase in autonomous spending of $10 billion into the US economy can be expected to raise real GDP over time by $14 billion. The paradox of thrift. When households become concerned about the future and decide to save more, the corresponding decrease in consumption leads to a drop in spending and income. Households end up consuming less, but they have not saved any more,